stark raving dad, holds the unfortunate honor of being the only Simpsons episode that's completely vanished from existence everywhere. Homer wears a pink shirt to work, gets committed to a mental institution because his coworkers think he's gone insane, and befriends this guy who believes he's Michael Jackson. The kicker? It actually was Michael Jackson doing the voice, credited under a fake name because of contract stuff with his record label. The episode is genuinely sweet. Leon Kompowski, the character, helps Bart write this birthday song for Lisa. That's one of the most heartfelt moments in early Simpsons history. Michael Jackson apparently wrote that song himself, which makes the whole situation even more complicated now. But then, Leaving Neverland dropped in 2019, and suddenly, this episode became radioactive. The documentary detailed some absolutely horrific allegations against Jackson, and the Simpsons producers made the call to pull the episode from circulation entirely, not just edit it, not just skip it in reruns, completely removed from existence. You can't stream it anywhere. It's not on Disney+, it's not on any official platform, and even the DVD sets that contained it are out of print. The only way to watch this episode now is through old recordings or less than legal means. It's the nuclear option of banning, total erasure from the official canon. What makes it extra sad is that the episode itself is fantastic. It's got nothing objectionable in the content, just a genuinely funny and touching story about mental health stigma and doing something nice for your sister. But the association with Jackson was enough to make it disappear forever. The City of New York versus Homer Simpson is the one that got caught in the crossfire of a real-world tragedy. Barney steals Homer's car and abandons it at the World Trade Center with about 1 million parking tickets attached. So the whole family has to go to New York, and Homer's stuck dealing with this boot on his car while everyone else explores the city. The episode is peak Simpsons. Homer's losing his mind in New York. There's this incredible sequence where he's desperately trying to find a bathroom and ends up in the Twin Towers, and the whole thing is just classic fish-out-of-water comedy. It originally aired in 1997 without any controversy whatsoever. Then, September 11th happened, and suddenly, this lighthearted episode about the World Trade Center became impossible to air. Fox pulled it immediately after the attacks, which makes complete sense given the circumstances. Nobody wanted to see comedy featuring buildings that had just been destroyed in a terrorist attack. When the episode eventually came back to rotation years later, it was butchered. They edited out basically every appearance of the Twin Towers, including that whole bathroom sequence, which was one of the funniest parts. Homer's frantic run through the towers, wide shots of the New York skyline, cropped or digitally altered. The really weird part is how some people turned this into a conspiracy theory. They claim the episode predicted 9/11 because there's a scene with a magazine cover showing the number 9 next to the Twin Towers, making it look like $9/11. That's some serious reaching. It was advertising a bus trip to New York for $9, but the internet loves its conspiracy theories. 30 minutes over Tokyo. Got the Simpsons family banned from an entire country. The family goes on a budget vacation to Japan after Homer becomes obsessed with saving money, and basically everything that can go wrong does go wrong. Homer insults the emperor, they lose all their cash, and they end up on a sadistic Japanese game show to win plane tickets home. The episode takes shots at Japanese culture left and right. There's a seizure-inducing anime sequence that directly references the Pokemon episode that hospitalized hundreds of kids in real life. They mock Hello Kitty merchandise, sumo wrestling gets the Family Guy treatment, and Japanese customs are played for laughs in ways that probably seem funnier in 1999 than they do now. Japan looked at this episode and said absolutely not. Banned immediately, never aired in the country. Not even available on Disney Plus in the region. China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan also refused to air it, though South Korea eventually caved and let it through after some initial resistance. The seizure joke is probably what sealed the deal. That Pokemon incident was a genuine health crisis. December 1997, Electric Soldier Porygon episode, strobe lighting effects caused kids across Japan to have seizures and convulsions. Over 600 people were hospitalized. The Simpsons turning that into a gag less than 2 years later? Yeah, that wasn't gonna fly. What's wild is that the episode isn't even trying to be malicious. It's just typical Simpsons. Americans are ignorant tourists, but when you're mocking another culture's tragedy and stereotyping an entire nation, the jokes land differently depending on which side of the Pacific you're watching from. Hey, by the way, I'm posting pretty consistently here, so it would mean a lot if you could subscribe to the channel and drop a like for the algorithm. The Cartridge Family. American gun culture with all the subtlety of a shotgun blast, and somehow it was the UK that had the biggest problem with it. Homer buys a gun after witnessing a football riot, and immediately becomes the poster child for irresponsible firearm ownership. He's using it as a can opener, pointing it at people, joining the NRA, the whole 9 yards. Marge is horrified, obviously, because she's the only sane person in Springfield. She tries everything to get Homer to get rid of the gun, eventually leaving him and taking the kids. Homer finally agrees to dispose of it, but then Marge sees herself holding the gun in a mirror and decides she likes having it around. That ending is darkly hilarious. The responsible one becomes seduced by gun ownership too. Sky One in the UK banned this episode initially, which is ironic because British audiences probably would have appreciated the satire more than Americans did. The NRA actually denounced the episode, which is how you know the Simpsons writers nailed it. When the organization you're mocking gets mad, you've done your job correctly. The episode eventually aired in the UK, but they edited the ending. That mirror scene where Marge decides to keep the gun, apparently showing the voice of reason succumbing to gun culture, was a bridge too far for British censors, even though that's literally the point of the scene. What makes this ban extra weird is that the episode is explicitly anti-gun. It's showing how dangerous and stupid casual gun ownership can be, how easily firearms lead to tragedy, and how gun culture normalizes insane behavior. But showing the dangers of guns apparently requires showing guns being used dangerously, and that's where the censors drew the line. Weekend at Burnsies is the one where Homer gets medically prescribed marijuana and suddenly becomes the most competent employee at the nuclear power plant. He's attacked by crows, because of course he is, and the doctor gives him medical weed for the pain. Instead of turning into a lazy stoner stereotype, Homer becomes calm, thoughtful, and actually good at his job for once. The episode doesn't show Homer actually smoking anything. There's no depiction of drug use, no joints, no bongs, nothing visual that would constitute showing marijuana consumption. The mere concept of Homer being high and functional was enough to freak out conservative critics and get the episode banned in the UK when it first aired. Mr. Burns is having a financial meltdown at the plant, and somehow stoned Homer is the guy who fixes everything. It's a pretty clear pro-legalization message wrapped in comedy. Look how much better everything is when Homer's medicated and relaxed instead of his usual panicked, incompetent self. The show's basically arguing that marijuana makes Homer a better person. The UK eventually lifted the ban and the episode aired, but that initial reaction shows how different drug policies and attitudes were in the early 2000s. This was still the war on drugs era, and depicting marijuana use, even medicinally, even in a cartoon, was controversial enough to warrant censorship. The irony is that Weekend at Burnsies is one of the least offensive episodes about drugs you could possibly make. There's no addiction storyline, no negative consequences, no very special episode moralizing. Homer just gets prescribed medicine, it helps him, and life goes on. That's apparently too radical for some censors. Little Big Mom got Lisa canceled in Japan, which is impressive given she's usually the most culturally sensitive character on the show. Marge breaks her leg skiing, so Lisa's left running the household because she's the only competent Simpson. Homer and Bart treat her like garbage, ignoring all her efforts to keep the house clean, so Lisa decides to teach them a lesson by making them think they have leprosy. She puts together this elaborate prank involving makeup and fake symptoms, convincing Homer and Bart that their skin is falling off from the disease. They completely panic, believing they're dying from leprosy, and Lisa reveals the trick to teach them about respecting her work. It's classic Simpsons sibling warfare taken to a dark extreme. Japan banned this episode immediately and it has never aired there. Not once. Not even on Disney Plus in the region. The reason, Japan has this incredibly painful history with leprosy that goes way beyond just the disease itself. The country had forced segregation laws for leprosy patients that lasted until 1996, yes, the 1990s, and the government has faced multiple human rights abuse charges over how they treated people with the disease. There were forced sterilizations, lifetime quarantines, families torn apart, people locked away from society for decades. The stigma was so intense that even after the laws changed, many former patients stayed in the sanitariums because they had nowhere else to go and society wouldn't accept them back. So when The Simpsons made a joke episode about faking leprosy to teach Homer and Bart a lesson, Japan looked at that and saw a casual mockery of one of their darkest historical atrocities. Lisa's prank isn't funny when you know the real-world context of what leprosy meant in Japan. It's horrifying. The episode also features Homer's stupid, sexy Flanders moment, which has become one of the most memed scenes in Simpsons history. That scene alone has probably been viewed billions of times online, but nobody in Japan gets to see it in context because the rest of the episode is too offensive to air. Cape Fear is one of the greatest Simpsons episodes ever made, and Germany banned it for having a Nazi. Sideshow Bob escapes from prison with one goal: murder Bart Simpson in cold blood. The family enters witness protection and moves to Terror Lake, but Bob follows them there, hijacks their houseboat, and comes incredibly close to actually killing a child before Bart talks him into performing the entire score of HMS Pinafore. The episode is a masterclass in suspense and comedy. Bob stepping on rakes repeatedly is one of the most iconic gags in television history. The showdown on the houseboat is genuinely tense despite being a cartoon, and Bart defeating Bob by exploiting his theatrical ego is perfect character work. But there's this one throwaway character, Homer's new boss in Witness Protection, who holds the rank of Obergruppenführer. That's a high-ranking SS position from Nazi Germany, and Germany has incredibly strict laws about depicting Nazi imagery or ranks outside of educational or historical contexts, using Nazi terminology for a joke. Absolutely forbidden. The whole point of the character is that Witness Protection gave the Simpsons terrible new identities and Homer a horrible new job, but that one Nazi reference was enough to get the entire episode banned in Germany initially. Never mind that the episode has nothing to do with Nazis. Never mind that it's one of the best episodes in the series. You break the Nazi imagery law, you get banned. Germany eventually allowed the episode to air, presumably with that character's rank edited out or changed, but the initial ban shows how seriously the country takes its laws about Nazi content. There's no wiggle room, no, but it's just a joke exceptions. Reference the SS in your cartoon. That's a banning. The other issue was the whole child murder plot. Germany apparently wasn't thrilled about an episode where the entire premise is a grown man's elaborate plan to kill a 10-year-old boy. The fact that Bob fails and it's played for comedy doesn't change the fact that you're watching detailed plans for murdering a child play out for 20 minutes. Blame it on Lisa. Sent the Simpsons to Brazil and managed to offend an entire country in the process. Lisa's been sponsoring a Brazilian orphan who goes missing, so the family flies to Rio to find him. Within hours of arriving, Homer and Bart get mugged by street children, Homer gets kidnapped by criminals who demand a $50,000 ransom, and Bart gets swallowed by a snake. The episode portrays Brazil as this lawless, dangerous nightmare where tourists get robbed immediately and kidnapped for ransom as a standard Tuesday afternoon activity. There's monkeys everywhere, everyone's dancing all the time, and the whole country is presented as a corrupt third world disaster zone. Subtle, it is not. Brazil was furious. The government actually issued formal complaints about the episode, calling it defamatory and demanding apologies. Critics pointed out the insane inaccuracies. Conga lines aren't even Brazilian. There are no wild monkeys in Rio, and the crime depiction was so over the top that it bordered on propaganda. The episode was banned in Brazil for years. Networks refused to air it, it wasn't available on any platform, and Brazilians could only watch it through imported DVDs or pirated copies. The ban became this weird point of national pride. We're not going to let Americans mock us like this. Eventually, Brazil lifted the ban, and the episode aired uncensored in 2012, a full decade after its original release. It's included in the DVD sets now, and Brazilians can stream it legally. Apparently enough time passed that the sting wore off, or maybe the country just decided the episode was too stupid to take seriously. The weirdest part is that Homer being kidnapped and held for ransom is played as this wacky adventure instead of a terrifying ordeal. He's hanging out in the rainforest with his captors, they're all having a good time, and the danger never feels real. But when you're from a country that actually struggles with crime and kidnapping, watching Americans turn that into cartoon comedy hits differently. Goo Goo Gai Pan got Selma banned from China. She's going through menopause and desperately wants to adopt a baby, so the Simpsons travel to China to get her a kid. There's one problem. China only lets married couples adopt, so Homer has to pretend to be Selma's husband throughout the entire trip, while Marge pretends to be a servant or something. It's a whole thing. The episode does the usual Simpsons travel show stuff, cultural misunderstandings, tourist traps, Homer being an ignorant American abroad. Nothing seems particularly controversial on the surface. Just another episode where the family goes somewhere foreign and chaos ensues, with ultimately heartwarming results. But then there's this one scene. They're in Tiananmen Square in Beijing, and there's a placard that says, "On this site, in 1989, nothing happened." That's it. That's the joke. A direct reference to the Tiananmen Square massacre that the Chinese government pretends never happened. China didn't find that funny at all. When Disney Plus launched in China in 2021 with the Simpsons catalog included, fans immediately noticed that Goo Goo Gai Pan was missing from the lineup. The episode had been quietly removed, never acknowledged, just gone. The official stance is that the Tiananmen Square reference is why it's banned, which tracks with China's aggressive censorship of anything related to the 1989 protests and massacre. The government has spent decades trying to erase that event from history, so an American cartoon making jokes about the cover-up isn't going to fly. What's darkly funny is that the joke itself is doing exactly what it's calling out, acknowledging that China denies the massacre happened. The Simpsons are mocking the censorship, and China's response is more censorship. It's like the episode predicted its own banning. The episode also came out in 2005, but didn't get banned until 2006, when China implemented new rules about foreign cartoons during prime viewing hours for kids. Goo Goo Gai Pine then stayed banned even after those restrictions loosened because that Tiananmen Square joke made it permanently radioactive for Chinese television. E pluribus wigum made one throwaway joke about Argentine history and got banned across all of Hispanic America. Homer accidentally destroys Springfield's fast food district, because of course he does. And to boost the economy, Mayor Quimby moves the presidential primary to Springfield. The media circus descends, the town gets exhausted by all the political nonsense, and in frustration they elect Ralph Wiggum as their candidate just to make it all stop. It's a pretty standard political satire episode that feels even more relevant now than it did in 2008. The joke is that American politics is so absurd that a literal child who eats paste could become a serious presidential candidate, and everyone's too tired of the circus to care anymore. Pretty much just predicting the future at this point. But then Carl and Lenny are having a conversation, and they casually mention how Juan Perón disappeared people during his presidency in Argentina. That's it. One line. A historical reference to political violence and the forced disappearances that happened under various Argentine governments, particularly during the Dirty War from 1976 to 1983. Fox looked at that joke and made the unprecedented decision to not air the episode anywhere in Hispanic America. Not just Argentina, the entire region. The concern was that audiences still traumatized by the Dirty War, and its aftermath would be devastated by casual jokes about people being disappeared by the government. This wasn't ancient history for many viewers. The Dirty War involved systematic kidnapping, torture, and murder of thousands of people by the military dictatorship. Families still don't know what happened to their loved ones. There are still ongoing trials for crimes committed during that period. It's a raw wound that hasn't healed. So when The Simpsons made a throwaway reference to political disappearances for a quick laugh, it crossed a line for audiences who lived through that horror or lost family members to it. The joke isn't funny when you know someone who was disappeared and never found. What makes it complicated is that the joke isn't even wrong historically. Perón's government did engage in political repression, and worse atrocities happened in the years after. But accuracy doesn't make it appropriate. Some things are too painful to joke about, especially for audiences directly affected by the trauma. A Maid Maggie is the most recent Simpsons episode to get banned, and nobody knows why. It came out in 2021 as part of season 33, and the Czech Republic immediately banned it while refusing to explain their reasoning. That's it. No official statement, no clarification, just this episode is banned and we're not telling you why. The episode itself seems totally harmless. Homer and Marge need to find a godfather for Maggie before her baptism, and they somehow end up asking Fat Tony, Springfield's mob boss. Maggie gets absorbed into the organized crime lifestyle. There's tons of Godfather references, and it's all very silly and inconsequential. Maggie's involvement with the mafia is played entirely for laughs. She's a baby participating in mob activities. The joke writes itself. There's nothing particularly edgy or controversial about it compared to what The Simpsons has done before. It's a standard episode with a fun premise and decent execution. So why did the Czech Republic ban it? Theories range from organized crime sensitivity to some obscure cultural reference that didn't translate well. Maybe there's a Czech mob connection that makes joking about children and organized crime uncomfortable. Maybe someone high up just didn't like the episode and used their power to ban it arbitrarily. The refusal to give a reason makes it weirder than the ban itself. Most countries, when they ban media, provide some justification. It's offensive, it's inaccurate, it references sensitive history. But the Czech Republic just said no without explanation, leaving everyone to speculate wildly about what could possibly be so offensive about a Maggie episode. The internet has run wild with conspiracy theories. Some think there's hidden Czech symbolism in the background. Others believe it's about organized crime connections in Czech politics. The most likely explanation is probably the most boring one. Some bureaucrat thought baptism jokes or mafia content was inappropriate for Czech audiences and pulled the episode without bothering to write up formal reasoning. It's fascinating how a completely unremarkable episode becomes mysterious entirely because of the lack of transparency around its banning. If the Czech Republic had just said, "We don't like the mob content," or "The baptism jokes offend local religious sensibilities," nobody would care. But the silence turns it into this weird enigma that'll probably never get solved. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so please subscribe, and thanks for watching.